evening, everybody. Call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. Inform the public we are returning from the executive session. Has the board had a chance to review the minutes of our last meeting?
I have, and I move to accept as printed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
They are accepted. Department heads. Chief, do you have something for us tonight?
Yes. You want me to go over there?
Yeah, that would be good. It's our podium tonight.
This is my monthly report for the police department. Very brief. Nothing really jumps out as exceptionally exciting in the last month, other than we went to 1,093 calls. We charged 34 people with crime. I had 3 non-fatal overdoses written down, but they're actually at one right now, so that's 4. And the improvements to the lockup facility are progressing as we expected, and we're hoping to be operational in mid to late December. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Jim. Any questions for Jim?
No, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bob, do you have anything, or are you just here for the hearing?
Just for the hearing.
Okay. I think the end of the department heads. We have one appointment this evening. It's the reappointment of a constable, Louis Cabeceras, and the chief has signed off on it. What's the board's pleasure?
Move to accept.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That is approved. So we're going to go back to our public hearing, which we continue to this week regarding the kennel license application at 142 Elm Street West for Matthew Canine Services. I would remind the public, because I think there are a few cases of the ground rules that we have. In order to speak, you have to be recognized by the chair. I'd ask that you go to our de facto podium when you want to speak, give your name and address for the record. As I said last week, we'll allow anybody who wants to speak an opportunity to speak. There's no rush. And we would just request that you keep your comments germane to the topic at hand and not anything that's irrelevant. So with that, I'll first open it up to the applicant if he or his representative would like to make any comment.
Good evening. My name is Richard Manning, and I'm the attorney for Justin Matthew. One of the concerns last week was the petition that the application actually Mr. Matthew had filled out. You should have received an amended application correcting which again that the capacity would be 8 dogs in the kennel. One of the main concern it seemed of the comments at last meeting was safety. It was a resounding theme that people were concerned mainly about, I guess, escaped dogs and the potential for harm to other members of the neighborhood. And I'd like to address those. We've actually, because of the plans we provided, there was an issue of notice. I just want to explain to everyone. Mr. Matthew got notice on Friday before the hearing to be here. And I know the neighbors were saying that they got some short notice. It was the same for Mr. Matthew as well. So we didn't have the ability to have a bunch of handouts. We didn't know what to expect. But the plans that we provided with the application, we blew up a few so everyone can see. And this is the proposed facility. If everyone can see, I have no easel. Couldn't afford an easel. So what this is a metal building, and I'll show you in a minute. This is going to be located far to the rear of the property, almost to the back rear line that abuts 495, where there's presently actually a heavily wooded area. This is the building that we discussed. It's obviously a roof building, an enclosed building, heated, temperature control, etc. There'll be 4 runners that come to the exterior of 4 on each side. Each one will have an 8-foot chain link fence, and it'd be completely covered. I know that was one of the concerns that one of the neighbors didn't understand, is that it is literally impossible for a dog to escape from one of these runners because they're completely enclosed in. They only are there too at certain parts during the day. At night, these are like trap doors. All the dogs are maintained within the building. When on a typical day, when dogs are either outside getting fresh air or inside, whenever they leave the building, it is done under the supervision of Mr. Matthew, and it's for the purposes of some training he's doing, which means he is either with the dog or leashed, or the dog is under his supervision. This isn't a kennel where you're going to have a fenced-in area and 6 to 8 dogs roaming around loose within a fenced area. They are brought out individually for training, otherwise they are maintained within the runners. This is their home for approximately 1 year. They're not running loose, they're not within an unsupervised area. The second photographs, again, show the general layout of the exterior of the building with the dogs runners, and this cuts away the roof so you can see that each one have individual stalls that go into their runners. There's a common area where some work is performed as well in the colder times. That is the metal building that'll be constructed towards the rear of the property where all the animals will be housed. Unfortunately, we couldn't get this much larger, but this shows the general location of where the kennel's going to go. On this picture right here, this is Elm Street West. This is 495, the railroad tracks, and this is the other boundaries of the property. What you have is this is the existing house where Mr. Matthews is going to reside. This doesn't even do justice because I was out there Saturday, and all of these lines here, through here, actually there's another one here, there's fencing, a series of fencing, one across the front, one across the rear, over here. There's a gate that's kept closed here, section off the back. There's old chicken coops over here. There's fencing around that. There is a fence here and a berm, and then there's a berm that runs all the way down this border of the property. When they finish clearing out some of the lot, that berm will be extended to a height to prevent anyone from being able to get out that way. There is a fence here along 495, portions of which has apparently collapsed. Mr. Matthews' father has been in touch with the DOT, and they're going to be out there hopefully soon, and they're going to redo this entire fencing, so it's all fenced in over here. This area over here is heavily wooded, and it shows better on the Google map shot, which shows that it's extensively wooded over here where the railroad tracks are on this side. One of the comments made too was about cleaning up the property, and I noticed when you look at the Google map photograph, right here you see it looks like truck trailers and some other components and things like that. That's all gone. That's already been cleared out. The idea is this road is going to be extended towards the back, towards the very rear of the property. They're going to clear a little bit of the area here, hopefully where the building will be located. That's going to be subject to the plans submitted to the building inspector, zoning requirements, etc. And everything will be located within the back, and this area all cleared out. There's a lot of existing area, like riprap type material. Some of that will be taken up and seeded, and the rest will be used to extend the road. So you can see both, and anyone can come and take a look at it from both the Google map and from the plan, exactly where they're gonna place the metal building. Again, in terms of safety, in addition to Mr. Matthews' presence on the property, the metal building is going to be video monitored, and Mr. Matthew and his brother will reside at the premises in the house, which they're already fixing up now in order to move in. So there's basically 24-hour presence on the property where the dogs will be kept. The other thing you have to understand is the type of dogs that he's dealing with. As we indicated earlier, Mr. Matthews is a certified trainer of dogs, and they're dogs that ultimately will be used either as service dogs or as police dogs. And as police dogs, some will be ultimately trained as attack dogs, used in law enforcement, others will be used as drug sniffing dogs, cadaver dogs, things of that nature. The dogs maintained at the property are going to be from approximately the age of 2 months to 12 to 14 months. And as I indicated when we were here last time, the dogs are not being trained as attack dogs on the premises. They're being trained mainly for obedience and socialization, to get the dogs to a point in their training where they then can go on from that point when they reach that age. Some will go on, will actually be sold to local police and law enforcement, sheriff's departments, be sold. They will then go into a training academy through the police where they'll be trained for their specific roles, whether it be some sort of a dog search, a search dog, or attack. But while they're on the premises, none of these dogs are being trained as attack dogs. And hopefully that will alleviate some of the fears of neighbors. You are not going to have a bunch of vicious German shepherds standing there frothing at the mouth waiting to get out. And as a matter of fact, if you're familiar with this type of training, the police dogs that are attack dogs are trained to respond on command. They are not constantly in a state of agitation. They're not constantly looking to attack people. So once they leave the premises and become trained in that area, they actually not only are trained to be obedient to the command, but they live with their handlers and they live with the handlers' families. And Mr. Matthew downloaded a couple of photos to show you, to give you an idea. These dogs, and one of these is Mr. Matthews. This is Silo, one of Mr. Matthews' personal dogs. These dogs live with children and families. The handlers who own the dogs, they're 24/7 with the dogs, and they are trained to obviously be able to live with people in a social atmosphere. And this is after they receive the training from the police department for that area. When they're in the premises here in Raynham, they're only going to be trained for socialization and obedience. So the most you're going to have is a 2 to 14-year-old pup that's being trained to be obedient, to go on to its other training. That is why one of the things that's different about a kennel that's strictly for boarding. When you have a kennel for boarding, you have no idea really who you're going to have, what type of dog you're going to have in there, whether it's trained, untrained, or whether it has any vicious capacities. You take the dog in, you board it. So what you're going to have is dogs that are trained to be obedient, trained to be social, that are going to be residing on the premises. There was a question at one point too also about, I believe, vaccinations and licensing. We actually have, Mr. Matthews, 2 dogs. We have the licenses and vaccinations certificates if you wish to see them. He also has 2 puppies right now that he's presently training. All dogs that he has will be licensed and vaccinated as age appropriate. The vaccinations don't start until a certain age of 3 or 4 months. They follow a regimen. In that regard, I also have to submit another letter on behalf of Mr. Matthew, and this is from Sharon Litch, who is the veterinarian that does all the veterinary work for Mr. Matthews' dogs. She will attest not only, again, she attests not only to the fact of his high integrity and responsibility, but to the quality of his animals and the way they're treated. And I would ask the board to make 3 copies again for the record.
Thank you.
So with that, I mean, I understand without knowing specifics, they didn't have the opportunity beforehand to hear a lot of this. There is no safety issue. There is no concern with the planned operations. And again, we're going to ask you to approve the license.
Council, before you yield and before I
Yes.
go to my board members, I just need a clarification for you.
Sure.
Last week, you gave us a packet, and one of the points under the proposed business, because it contradicts what you just told us, you said none of the training exercise would happen on site, but one of these points says a large portion of the business is conducted off-site with some supervised training exercises on-site. And so my question is, what are those training exercises? Because a minute ago, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that wouldn't be taking place. It would be simple obedience. And so, to me, simple obedience and training exercises are 2 completely separate and distinct issues.
And I apologize, but they're not. The training on site is obedience and socialization training. I was trying to distinguish, so to alleviate concerns, that there is no training involving the ultimate training of the dogs for police work or things of that nature. Obviously, there's going to be things like teaching a dog to stay when he goes over here. That's for one of the better phrase, training. That type of work will be done on site, but there is no police type training.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody from the board at this time have a question for the attorney?
No, I do not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just, thanks, counsel. For the record, I'll read into the record the amended application to the Board of Selectmen. Please let this letter serve my request to amend the above petition as follows. Total number of dogs over 3 months old will be kept 8. Average number of dogs at any given time, 8. On kennel premises, will dogs be kept as pets? Yes. Describe all fences, shelters, runs, or other structures on premises to be occupied by dogs, and whether the structures now existing or are proposed. 4 10 by 10 and 4 5 by 10 enclosed outdoor and indoor runs in a temperature-controlled 16-foot by 36-foot structure with a fenced and training field. That's from Matthew Canine Services. At this time, we'll open it up to the public for questions, comments. Ma'am?
You mentioned the sale.
If you could.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yep. And just remember name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Christina Saunders, and I live at 154 Elm Street West. It's the property that directly abuts 142 Elm Street West. I have a few questions, but I'll begin with my statement that I've prepared, if that's okay.
Sure.
So thank you guys so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be speaking in front of the Board of Selectmen, and thank you for the town of Raynham, the residents, for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you. I am a third generation Raynham resident. My grandparents moved here in the 60s from Rhode Island. I was raised in the same house that my mother was raised in. My parents met at VR. I met my husband at VR. I was actually fortunate enough to spend 2 years in this very building when it was an elementary school. My family did make the long move over to Bridgewater, but I was fortunate to keep many of my relationships with my friends in Raynham, and we were later reunited at the high school. When Jeff and I started dating, obviously he owned a house in Raynham, so I was so excited to be able to come back to the community. I knew this was a place where I really wanted to plant my roots and grow my family. There's no other town that I'd rather raise my daughter in. I'm really looking forward to seeing her grow up here and have the same childhood memories that I did as a young girl. So over the weekend, I was fortunate enough to speak to a lot of the residents here today, as well as Mr. Matthew. When speaking with my neighbors, I really felt that I didn't have enough information at hand to ask the board to reject this application. As a result, I was looking for support via a petition that the town approve this license, but with conditions, with a lot of the safety conditions being addressed. I was really surprised that going around to our neighbors and talking to everyone, there was actual overwhelming support against the application, and many people were asking me why I wasn't seeking to reject it. I didn't get to every house on the street. It actually was a really longer process than I anticipated. But every person I met was on board, wanted to sign the document that I had, and was really in support of the conditions that I was asking for. But I'll get to that a little bit further on. After speaking with my neighbors, I had the opportunity to meet Mr. Matthew. I have to say I was really impressed with this young man. It's so refreshing to see someone at such a young age have a passion and be able to translate that passion into a career. I don't think there's many of us here today that can say that what we do for a living is actually, we love our job. I don't know how many people can say that. I know I can't. Justin is clearly the exception with that, right? He's doing what he loves. In talking to Justin and with his family and walking through the property, a lot of the concerns that my husband and I had last week were alleviated. So Saturday afternoon, talking to neighbors, talking to Justin, I really felt like I was in a predicament. What do I do? How do I approach this? Based on the conversations with my neighbors, it was clear that a lot of people, or I don't want to say a lot, I don't want to quantify it, but some people oppose the application. But as Mr. Matthew's next door neighbor, I want to be welcoming. I want to be supportive. I'm excited to have him in the neighborhood, and I'm speaking from the bottom of my heart. So I go to my sounding board, my mother. She always offers the best advice, and ultimately what she made me realize is that I have to advocate for my family. I am the only person that I trust to speak for what is right for me and my family, regardless of the other members of the community. What it comes down to for me is, regardless of what type of business is moving next door, is our neighborhood the right place for a business? Because that's ultimately what this transaction is. What I've learned since Saturday is that the property at 142 Elm Street West was zoned for business before 495 existed. So when it was originally zoned as a business, there was direct access through a commercial road that when 495 was built, that road was eliminated. And as a result, that even though the direct access was lost, the property was grandfathered in and it was allowed to keep that business zoning status. It is on record with the Raynham tax assessor that dating back to at least 2006, which is when their electronic files began, The former owners of this property were only paying taxes as a property assessed as a single-family residence, and that the property has never been used for business purposes, at least back to that date, based on those tax records. It was just kind of conveniently grandfathered in, and the zoning had never been adjusted. That's my novice interpretation of the situation. I have had a few conversations with people today. I don't even know if the lines that I'm making are clear, but that's how I am interpreted it. Because of the lack of that adjustment, you, the board, are now tasked with determining if this application is valid in a community that has evolved since the original zoning of that property. That's why I'm not formally submitting my petition today. I am actually quite confident and believe in myself in asking you to reject the application based on an antiquated zoning status. If this application is approved, this business would be accessed through a residentially zoned area. I don't know how often businesses are accessed through an area that is residentially zoned. I don't know if that's applicable, but that to me is a big item. And I ask you guys, the board, to be confident that this has been fully vetted in review of the application. A business is a business. It doesn't matter if it's a dog kennel, a food truck, a craft store, or a McDonald's. Is our neighborhood in its current state an appropriate place for a business? I have to do right by my family and go on the record as saying no. Please know that I would be voicing this opinion no matter what the business is. It doesn't matter if it's a dog kennel or a McDonald's. My opinion is no, and ultimately I'm placing this in your hands. I do ask that if the board decides to approve this application and allow this area to remain zoned for business, that you approve of some conditions. First, as Mr. Matthews' lawyer addressed, safety is the utmost priority for us. I see the formal plans for the land and I think it's really solid. The fencing that was mentioned earlier is pretty dilapidated and very worn down. So I would ask that there is at least an 8-foot fence around the property. I'm probably shooting for the stars with that one, but I do want to go on the record with that request. Just to limit the flight risk, I know these are young dogs. They probably can't jump as mature German Shepherds can, but just to try to eliminate that flight risk and also to protect Mr. Matthews' dogs from our lovely local wildlife. Second, I ask that the application be revised to more accurately reflect the scope of the kennel. This is the question that I just kind of jumped out earlier. I think the application, as I have a copy of it, says that there is no selling of dogs, but it does sound like there will be sale of the dogs after they're fully trained, so if we could just include that in the application, I would appreciate it. And then lastly, I think it's important to recognize that the goal of any business is to grow and be successful and expand an opportunity. The scope of the current business plan for the kennel, as laid out today, could change at any time. We might be back here in a year if there was a revised application to increase the number of dogs in the kennel. Or if Mr. Matthew does look to expand his services, I'm much more comfortable that there's no attack training going on today, but as he grows in his industry, is there a potential for there to be attack training there? So really all that I'm asking is that if this application is ever revised, resubmitted, I do ask the board to keep our community posted, keep us informed, let us know about the changes, and seek guidance and input from us to determine if the updated scope of the business makes sense for our community. I really appreciate your time and letting my voice be heard. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just so you know, your husband admirably represented you last week.
Okay, I'd also like to go on the record that I wanted to make a joke about that at the beginning, but he asked that I cross it out because he said it was going to kill everything.
Well, I thought it was.
That's on the record. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? Ma'am? And just while you're getting up, if I could just clarify for the record, so everybody knows, all we can determine tonight is whether the application will be approved or denied. We can't change zoning. That's a completely separate process. So if there is anybody disputing the type of zoning on that property, there's a specific venue which is through town meeting to address that. So I don't want to give anybody any false illusions as to what can and can't be done this evening. Yeah.
I'm going to submit first to the board a copy of my letter that my husband and I have signed.
Okay. Thank you.
My name is Kim Martin. I live at 20 Carpenter's Lane, which is a property that abuts Mr. Matthews via 495. So we're only separated by the abandoned railroad tracks. So, to Raynham Board of Selectmen, subject proposed kennel at 142 Elm Street West. In speaking last week at the Board of Selectmen meeting, I and fellow neighbors brought up concerns and questions related to the proposed new business of a kennel at 142 Elm Street West. In the short span of a week, I have spent much time considering the impact of a canine training kennel. I believe the neighborhood and residents of Raynham receive little notice to truly understand both adverse and possible positive effects. I have been a resident of Raynham for most of my life. Having made Raynham a home for my family on land which has been in my maternal grandmother's family for over 75 years. It has been a great honor and personal choice to live in this community. It is a blessing to now have our children who are 9 and 12 years old live in town, play on the same land I played on, go to many of the same schools I attended, and establish lifelong bonds in this community. I urge the Board of Selectmen to carefully consider where this proposed kennel is to be located for many reasons. First and foremost, the use of the 142 Elm Street West land for a business, in my opinion, would be a non-conforming use of land on a mainly residential property and neighborhood. Are there other businesses in Raynham where one needs to drive on and through a residential property to get to a business? The 142 Elm Street West business zone portion of the property is landlocked. It is very probable that the business zone portion of this property was done prior to the existence of Interstate 495. When one could access the said business zone portion of 142 Elm Street West, where 495 is at this present time. Next, I foresee an unease for the safety of those who come to play and watch softball games at the Raynham softball field, which is directly across from 142 Elm Street West. Elm Street West is a rural street with a speed limit of 20 miles per hour, where there are no sidewalks. For our family, the kennel location directly impacts us due to its location in the surrounding neighborhood. Our land is separated from the 142 Elm Street West property by an abandoned railway line. This abandoned railway line has no fencing and is a direct route to Carver Street as well as Bridge Street. I am concerned for the safety of our children, their friends that play in our yard, and neighborhood children should one of the canine dogs become loose from the 142 Elm Street property. At present, the 142 Elm Street property has neither an appropriate size fence around the business portion of the land nor such appropriate fencing for the entire 4.8 acres. What is an appropriate fence height for a kennel that trains canine police dogs? I asked the town to consider, would I be able to use my backyard as a business? My expertise isn't in town zoning by any means, but as I look at the zoning map, a portion of my backyard possibly might be zoned as business, and it is not accessible from the street, and it abuts 495. Could we put a store, a coffee shop, or any other business in our backyard? I remember when we built our home almost 13 years ago. I recall needing to obtain many levels of town department approvals. What is the process for a business building in the town? Will the 142 property be required to go through a similar process? What building permits will be required with sign-offs from department heads of the fire department, police, water, electrical, and other departments that have vested interest in the construction of said kennel? In closing, I have great admiration for Mr. Matthew. His important work of training canines. I congratulate him at such a young age for obviously having such a passion for his work and welcome him to this close-knit neighborhood. I do, however, ask that the town of Raynham consider questioning, give great thought to the next steps forward. Thank you.
Anybody else?
chose to give a detailed history of where we are from last week to this week, and some of my concerns regarding the application for this kennel license. Just at the outset, I did go to the town hall today, and I did receive a copy of the amended attachment for the application.
Mrs. Chapman, if you could, just give the name and address.
I certainly will.
Thank you.
Linda Chapman, 202 Elm Street West, Raynham, Massachusetts. Okay, let's start. Proposed kennel at 142 Elm Street West, Raynham. Summary of history. I attended the 10/18/16 Selectmen's meeting where a hearing for the kennel was on the agenda. My verbal opposition was regarding access to a commercial area within a residential parcel of 142 Elm Street West. Access through a residential parcel to a commercial zone was a predominant concern. Additionally, I spoke to several safety concerns relating to the types of dogs that would be training, canine police service dogs. Regarding the possibility of them becoming loose within the residential area. An additional hearing was granted for this evening with the request from the Selectmen for the applicant to clarify issues regarding safety and other matters. Since last week, I have explored my thoughts relating to this matter. I have several concerns that I would like to address this evening. First, A, zoning and conforming use of property. As I have reviewed, I continue to state that access from and through a residential area does not seem appropriate for the approval of a commercial business, namely a proposed kennel. Access is the key point that I address, with future implications to other future commercial requests within the town of Raynham. As I look at the zoning map, my assumption is that this section of 142 Elm Street West was accessible at one time prior to Route 495 coming through Raynham. Once 495 came through, this portion was then landlocked, and the zoning on the parcel or other parcels within that area were not changed. There is no commercial access to any backland within the Elm Street West area, to my knowledge, but there might be in the fact other lots that would have the same zoning issues. Clarification on this certainly is needed, as not to set a precedent for other businesses wanting to do similar enterprise or other commercial interests. 2, I have inquired and received documentation from the Town of Raynham Assessors Department stating how this property has been classified for use throughout its past history. These records state, as far back as computer software records show, this has always been taxed as a residential property. I have documentation stating that previous assessments, which go back to 2006, also list a 101 use code, residential, stating that the former property owners of 142 Elm Street West were paying a residential tax rate, a 101 use code for a one-family residence. That is over 9+ years that this property has no use as a commercial property, and they were taxed as such. This further shows that the residential street of Elm Street West is a residential neighborhood, and the addition of a commercial section doesn't conform to this use in a residential neighborhood environment. Also provided is the 2016 tax bill that shown owners taxed at the FY 2016 residential tax rate of $14.98 per thousand. B, kennel application. The original kennel application that was submitted by Mr. Matthau dated 9/16. This was signed prior to the applicant even owning the property. However, filled out as the property owner with the address at 142 Elm Street West. Ownership is recorded as of October 17, 2016. Information contained within. The property owner is listed as Justin Matthau. This is an incorrect statement, as the ownership of this parcel, land, house is in joint tenancy of Justin Matthau, Thomas Matthau, and Kerry Matthau, referenced in the Massachusetts Quitclaim Deed, Bristol County North Registry of Deeds, and I note the book number and the page. This was also mentioned in the mortgage document, also recorded at the Bristol County North Registry of Deeds, with the book and page as described here in this statement. And I further say that this was an incomplete application. On 9/16/16, this application was incomplete, and it continues to be incomplete. No emergency contact is listed on this application, nor in the amended document. This is very important, and it goes to safety of dogs. If one or more gets out of the kennel, who can the dog officer or the police call? There's no emergency contact listed. This is an incomplete document. Nothing is completed for the sole proprietorship or LLC of this business. This is information regarding this is listed in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Corporation Division that Matthew Canine Services LLC was organized in Massachusetts 8/13/2015 with an address of resident agent Justin Matthau at 168 8th Street, New Bedford, with the ID number 00118547. The original application states 5 plus or minus dogs. Dogs over 3 months. The amended addendum, hand delivered to the town on 10/20, now states 8. Average number of dogs at any given time states on the original application 4 to 6. The amended speaks to an increased number. It states 8. Will dogs be kept as pets? The original application says no. The amended application says yes. Original application states 5 10x10 runs with 5x10 temperature control structure to be built. The amended document at 10/20/16 states 4 10x10 enclosed outdoor and indoor runs in a temperature controlled 16x36 structure with a fenced-in training field. My question, the fence is what size for the fenced-in area of the training field? That height has not been addressed. Question, what is the exact square footage of the business zone parcel where all these activities are taking place? The original application is missing the breeds and the numbers of dogs. Nothing noted about that in the amended application. Question, please specify the ownership of the dogs and types of breeds that you're housing on your property. Original application will not be selling dogs. Reference letters submitted on 10/18 in the attorney's packet, which is not an official application, but the attorney's packet that he provided. He will not be selling dogs. Reference letters, however, submitted on 10/18/16 references 2 dogs being purchased. Question, it isn't clear. So will dogs be sold by Mr. Matthew Canine Services LLC? Building inspector wrote on the original application that, quote, activities to be in business zone portion of lot only. My question, is it reasonable to assume that dogs will not have access to train, run, and walk throughout the residential, quote, residential 3+ acres of the property? This goes to the safety for a fence to be installed for the entire perimeter of this property. What size should that fence be if you live next door? Safety, my final point. To ensure the safety of all persons located in close proximity of the property is of paramount concern. This kennel, as proposed, will train future canine dogs to be used in law enforcement someday. I appreciate the passion of Justin Matthau in his quest for training these dogs in the early stages of their life. I also endorse the police departments and their canine companions, both in Raynham and all towns, locally, statewide, and throughout the country. They do a valuable service to all residents, and I'm very thankful for their protection from threats that would harm our society. However, with that being said, I have looked at research that suggests that canine dogs can jump a height of a 6-foot fence and run over 30 miles an hour. I need to request that the town of Raynham and the animal control officer will ensure that all regulations relating to the animal control bylaw of the town of Raynham and the Public Safety and Good Order Statute, Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Chapter 140, Section 137 to 174E, are honored, observed, and guaranteed to protect the safety of our families residing in this town of Raynham. Liability insurance. I ask the town of Raynham especially for a matter as serious as a business that specializes in the training of canine dogs. How is the town of Raynham in the ownership of 142 Elm Street West responsible for liability? Homeowners insurance is a difficult and a high cost for one dog that would be listed on the aggressive dogs list. How will a carrier insure this operation? What is the protection for this residential neighborhood? In conclusion, as a resident of this great town for over 58 years, I take great pride in our community, our values, and our residents. We are the pride of this town. I ask the Board of Selectmen to review my thoughts, evaluate its application on its merits, its accuracy, authenticity, and arrive at a conclusion that will address the access of commercial property, address any and all safety concerns of this application, and the validity of the issuance of a kennel license for this purpose. In closing, I thank Justin for his anticipated cooperation in this regard as a neighbor at 142 Elm Street West. Respectfully submitted, Linda Chapman.
Thank you, Mrs. Shepherd.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
Hi, my name's Mary Ritz, and I live at 195 Elm Street West. Basically, all of my concerns were addressed by everybody else here. You know, safety, the fence around the house right now is, like Christine said, it's all dilapidated. It's only about a, 4-foot fence going around there. That's not gonna stop anything. You know, it's, our street, we have a tight-knit community. We have a family-oriented neighborhood. We have kids riding bikes up and down the street, playing up in that ball field. I don't care what they say about the safety, you know, the dogs are gonna be contained. You're gonna put an 8-foot fence. What's the chances of a dog digging underneath the fence? These dogs, German Shepherds and the Maltese, whatever you call them, they dig underneath. I'm just really concerned about them getting out. I really am. I'm fearful for the neighborhood with these dogs. There's just way too many of them. I appreciate that you want to have a business, but it doesn't belong on Elm Street West. I'm sorry, and I say no. And I hope that you consider, please.
Thank you, ma'am.
That's all I have to say.
Anybody else? Okay. I have one other piece of correspondence that we received from a resident who was unable to attend My father stopped in to speak with you last week regarding the proposed dog kennel on Elm Street West because my parents did not know that there was a meeting regarding this issue. They did not attend. He told my dad that if he sent in a letter, it would be read at the next meeting. My parents are 83 years old and no longer drive at night. I'm unfortunately unable to drive them to the meeting tonight. I respectfully submit the following to be read at the meeting tonight regarding this issue. We will be watching it on the local cable station and hope to see this issue addressed and resolved. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of my parents, Lou and Marilyn Oliver. My parents live at 9 Mowry Street and abut the proposed business of Mr. Justin Matthew. They have lived as this address for 40 years and have tolerated many annoyances from the business that has been located directly behind their house. The Raymonds operated a trucking business and it was constant 18-wheelers in and out at all times, diesel engines running for hours in cold weather, fumes, dust from dirt bikes and ATVs along with the smells of farm animals. The fumes, noise, and dust have at times been so bad that they cannot open their windows or enjoy their backyard. When the leaves come off the trees that border their backyard, it looks like all the trucks, tires, and scrap metal are in their yard. They have several concerns and requests regarding Mr. Matthews' proposed business. One, why were no abutters notified of this plan? The only way that people found out about this was a Facebook post. My parents don't have access to the internet. If it wasn't for a neighbor contacting them, they would never have known. Two, why is another business being allowed to be conducted at this address? This house and trucking company has been owned and run by the same family for years. Anytime a complaint was called in, people were told the family could do whatever they wanted on the property because all rights were grandfathered in. A family member would move out, another one moved in. Why are business-owned rights being passed to Mr. Matthew? 3, how will the noise of barking dogs be controlled? Keeping dogs in the kennel does not sound like a humane solution to keeping dogs quiet. Also, is proposed area even safe for animals? Years of junk being buried on the site, oil and gas being drained into the ground must have made the entire field toxic. If this business is approved, my parents request a privacy fence be erected to completely block out the site from their property. Mature plantings will also control noise and add to the privacy. They do not want to look at the out of their windows or be in their backyard and see the buildings or dogs being trained. 5, it is not that my parents wish to stop Mr. Matthew from conducting a successful business, but consideration must be shown to all abutters. The safety and noise factors must be taken into address. People in the immediate area want to enjoy their homes and property. After years of putting up with a trucking business, everyone is looking forward to quiet. This will not happen with a kennel abutting so many backyards. Also, safety concerns with dogs and small children have abutters very concerned. On a side note, my uncle owns 7 acres of property in East Taunton with a kennel license that he would have been thrilled to sell to Mr. Matthew. The kennel license could have been transferred to his name and there would have been no issues. He can contact me if further information on the property is requested. Sincerely, Susan Oliver Freitas, 300 Crane Ave South in Taunton. That was a direct read. That was not me trying to sell another property. Does anybody have any other questions or comments? Now will be a time before I turn it over to the board for discussion and a potential vote. None? Counselor?
Just to address a few of the points made, Mr. Chairman. As you indicated, this is not a question of zoning in this case. As we indicated in the application of the drawings, the portion of the property where the kennel is going to be located is zone business, which means a business use can be made as a matter of right. It is not grandfathered in, and it has nothing to do with the tax assessment on the property. In fact, as there seems to be a contradiction between the neighbors. One says there's never been a business there. The letter you just read was very forthright. Apparently there was some trucking business operated there years before by the predecessor Untitled. What's going to happen here, as you know, is when the kennel is built, the permits are pulled with the governance of the building inspector. The property will then be assessed appropriately for the use being made. It has probably only been assessed as residential because the only use reported to the town over the years has been a residential use with the property. If there was this trucking business going on, it might not have been made known to the town. But once the building permit is pulled, as you know, the property is reassessed, both for the value, the amount of the tax for the value of the property due to the structure as well as its use. The other thing I would point out is that there seems to be a great concern about a kennel in a residential district. I didn't do as much research as the neighbors, but I did look at what other kennels we have here in Raynham. And I found that there's 5 other kennels registered or licensed here in Raynham. 4 of the 5 are completely within residential zoned districts with residences all around, no business or commercial use in the area. So it just shows you that this can be done and has a history of being done in Raynham, and it can be done safely. The safety was the main concern. This is going to be, as we've indicated, a state-of-the-art facility where the dogs are contained in appropriate size runners, completely fenced in. I know this woman last week, and forgive me, I forget your name, you're concerned about them getting over the fence. I explained to you there's a top on the fence. Tonight you're concerned about them digging under the fence. They gotta be mighty damn strong dogs, because there's a cement pad.
Strong dogs.
There's a cement pad, ma'am, under the runner. They would have to dig through cement.
And if they got out of the kennel?
They would have to dig through cement, ma'am, to get out of the kennel, or chew through chain link fence, which there is no dog that I'm aware of that can do that. These dogs, again, there is this misconception, there's this fear, whether it's not in my backyard or just an unjustified fear of the animals. These dogs are not being trained to attack. It's obedience and socialization, and they are puppies between the ages of 2-3 months to about 12 or 14 months. They are not large, full-grown German Shepherds. They have not been trained to attack, and they never will be trained to attack on the property. In regards to the sale of the dogs, the representation made in the application by Mr. Matthew, who did it himself, is that he's not going to be engaged in the retail sale of dogs. This isn't a pet store. As he indicated, and we presented to you last week, he purchases puppies. He told you he has friends from California where he did his training. He purchases the puppies, brings them to the facility, trains them in socialization and in obedience, and then he is able to sell them to police departments, sheriff's departments, other law enforcement agencies, when they then go into their specialized training, whether it be some type of a cadaver or drug sniffing or attack. That doesn't happen on the premises. You actually have dogs and animals that are sitting there that are being trained to be obedient. There is virtually no credence to any possibility of escape or harm from these animals. It's a 5-acre lot. He's certified. You've seen the certifications. You see how everyone in law enforcement, veterinarian, everyone who deals with him is impressed both with his abilities, his abilities as a trainer and as a business owner. And I want you to give that consideration. I understand their fears, but if the fears were unfounded, I'd ask you to stand up and say that this is something that is good. It's good for both Mr. Matthew and the community. Thank you.
Mrs. Robin? Sure, Mrs. Chapman.
You know, I'm trying to, Linda Chapman, 202 Elm Street West again. I just want to say, I'll go back to the access issue of a commercial business through a residential. I'm driving that point home loud and clear, and I'm not saying that you have the ability to vote on it, but perhaps it needs to be looked at by town council for further clarification on when that zoning did or didn't change based on 495 and some research, because as Kim Martin mentioned, that part of her land in the back is zoned a business, and I think mine, even on 202 Elm Street West, abutting 495, which land was taken from my dad, is also. A case in point, to the attorney that just spoke, that business was Mr. Raymond's, the older man Raymond, that lived on as you're looking at Mr. Matthew's property, it's to the left. And he plowed for the town years ago. This is going back 40 and 50 years ago, and I don't know if there's any other people that have been in the neighborhood that might want to comment on Mr. Raymond's business, but that's not the zoning area that I'm talking about when I do my comments. Lastly, I'm going to leave you with this. I referenced the incomplete application, and Mr. Matthew signed this application on 9/16/16, and the acknowledgement that he signed was this: I hereby state that all information provided on this application is true and accurate, and I understand that any information that is found to be false or misleading will result in the forfeiture of this license. This license will be effective for the listed location and will be subject to all terms, conditions, and limitations set forth in the Raynham code ordinances, any applicable state and federal laws, and any condition prescribed by the town. I submit to you that his application was not forthcoming, even with his amendments that were added this evening. There are glaring discrepancies, not only with the ownership of the property that wasn't disclosed, the selling of the dogs, and the other issues that I covered earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. Last comment. Sir?
Good evening, Board. Good evening, everybody. My name is Eric Marshall. I am a canine officer from the city of Newburyport, up on the North Shore. I've known Justin for a year and a half. I've been training with him throughout that time. I understand your concerns as far as the property, but I just would like to speak to him, speak for him as a person. As everybody's expressed, his drive, his passion to raise these dogs, to get them in a position for us as handlers to take him over is crucial. He has a training and the passion that he shows at the early stages of the dogs, when he's going to have them from 2 months up to just past a year, is when you get the baseline of what the dog is capable of as far as his obedience, his tracking ability. And it's not till later on, when they're roughly a year and a half, when you start integrating the aggression. Everybody keeps saying attack, attack, attack. We don't look at them as attack dogs. They're trained for aggression. And aggression is only used when need be. But, I know there's a couple other canine handlers out here that every time they heard the word attack, it's not the correct terminology, and I just would like to address that they're trained for aggression. Most dogs will go almost their whole career with none or very few bites. A lot of time, the mere presence of the dog can work wonders. I can speak on my behalf. I've had my dog active for over a year. Had no bites. His mere presence, his mere show of aggression with the barking and the appearance works wonders. And I just want, what he's doing is not the aggression work at the stage when he's going to have the dog. And he's laying the foundation for what the dog is going to learn when he's at when the dog goes to the 4-month academy. We all spend 4 months with our dogs before we are certified to go on patrol with them. And it's at that point when they get the aggression training and everything that you guys are really worried about. And I understand your concern. I understand, it's something I went through in my town when I brought my dog home with my neighbors. And I just, not to keep repeating, but the point when he has his dog is not when those dogs are going to be trained for aggression. It's going to be the tracking, the obedience, and just the baseline for future training. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. I saw somebody else that they had. Ma'am?
Brenda Fleming, 171 Elm Street West. I just want to clear up one thing as far as the Raymond land, just so that you understand. When they were talking about the trucking company, there were 2 houses, 2 Raymond houses. This house that Justin bought at 142 was lived in by Mr. Raymond's wife. That was her sister that lived there, and she had a disabled son. She lived there for a number of years. More recently, David Raymond, son of Mr. Raymond, purchased that house. These 2 houses have always been called Raymond houses, but you're talking about 2 different houses. The house that had the trucking company was Mr. Raymond, and the other house was, like I said, Mrs. Raymond's sister, which was 142, which is the land that Justin purchased. I just wanted to clarify that. And one other thing I have to say, when this gentleman got up and said these dogs are not particularly aggressive. We know the aggression. We have a very dear friend who has had canines for years, worked with the police, worked with the corrections in Bridgewater, rose to quite a level. He now judges these. About 6 or 8 months ago, he was at one of the meets, or whatever you call it. He was judging them, and he was sitting in his seat. One of those dogs that was being judged came over and ripped his arm open, right at the meet while this was going on. And he knew that he couldn't move. I mean, they all rose to help him and to stop the dog and whatever. But this is the healthy fear that we have. Not that these, granted, if they're little dogs and they're in their, first year of their life, okay, maybe those will be all right. But as somebody else stated, please let us know if this escalates to anything bigger, because we do have a healthy fear. Not only for the young community that has just moved into our neighborhood, we have little babies that have moved in, but also for that elderly couple that is pretty much defenseless if these dogs get out and get to them. And that's our fear. And it's a sad thing. I mean, he purchased this. I wish that when you purchase something like this, with the idea of doing something like this, before you purchase the land, I wish that people would, feel out the community, just see what you have here, and as I said, we have a young community moving in, and there's an awful lot of young children, and that ball field, they now have, on weekends, tailgating, they have a lot of families that are out there, and maybe it won't be his dog, but we have seen it in our neighborhood that these dogs get over fences. Our backyard, we had Rottweilers, and they came over the fence, and the guy was totally enclosed with a fence. Granted, that was just their dog, but that's the healthy fear we have. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Roberts, any questions or comments?
I appreciate everybody's concern and listening to both sides, and I appreciate Mr. Matthews wanting to open a business, and I appreciate the residents with their concerns with the dogs and their families and everything that goes into it. Thank you.
Mrs. Smith?
Well, I'll tell you, this is extremely difficult. I can understand how everyone in this room on this side of the boardwalk, so to speak, how you all feel. I don't happen to feel that way, but nevertheless, it's not my prerogative to bring my feelings into this situation, okay? My concern is strictly with the zoning and strictly with the, I don't know how to put this, strictly with the property itself and whether or not it's legally able to be used for whatever it is that Justin wants to do. I myself have no problem with the kennel. It is entirely with zoning, it's entirely with access from a residential area to a business site. And I have no questions because all of my questions were answered the last time regarding the situation, regarding the kennels, regarding the safety of it. So I really have nothing more that I can say. I appreciate what Justin is trying to do. I think it's well needed. And I appreciate each and every one of you for the thoughts that you have because you're concerned. You're concerned about your families, you're concerned about your property, you're concerned about your town. And I'm pleased that you are all here because you are concerned citizens of Raynham. Like I said, I have no problem with kennels. I have problem with zoning. I have problem with people using property that they're not supposed to use for whatever it is. I don't care what kind of business. And I have no comment to make.
Thank you. I just want to add one quick thing because it's been brought up by a few different people, and so it won't necessarily apply to this application, but I think more so as a learning experience and for future reference. We've had some discussions, and I've talked to Mr. Buckner about the notification process that a lot of you have alluded to, and just for clarification's sake, when it's a change of zoning or liquor-related things, there's a formal notification sent out by the applicant. In these types of instances, there's no requirement that compels the applicant to do so, and there's no mechanism or device that necessarily requires or permits the town to do so, but I think I feel comfortable speaking for the board, lesson learned, and I think it's something that we can explore to compel future applicants on similar applications to do a notification to abutters, because I hear you loud and clear. I think we all hear you loud and clear that heading into last week there could have been a better process. I guess thankfully for Facebook in this instance, you were all able to know that, and so in that regard, some of our rules on the books are from years ago when there were 2,000 people in town and not 13,000, and everybody talked to everybody every day. And so we still have a job to do in terms of updating that to reflect the changing dynamic in the community. So we hear you loud and clear on that, and I think we'll work to clean that up moving forward. So just for your clarification on that, I would entertain a motion at this time to make a determination on the application.
At this time, I would have to, based on the information that we have, and having not had advice of town council or opinion from town council, I would have to, at this point in time, deny the license. And I would so make that as a motion.
I would second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The application is denied unanimously. Thank you.
Joseph,
Yes.
would you please tell the applicants that they can't hear this?
Yes, you are entitled to an appeal. You can consult with your counsel on that. Do we want to adjourn for 2 minutes?
I do, please.
We're adjourned for 2 minutes. Reconvene after that brief recess. New business, Ms. Roberts.
I have nothing.
Mrs. Smith. Old business, Ms. Roberts.
I have nothing.
Mrs. Smith. Town administrator's report, Mr. Buckler.
Fall town meeting coming up November 14th, 7 p.m. at the middle school. Pre-town meeting is November 8th at 7 p.m. at Town Hall. Warrants will be mailed the weekend of November 5th. Board of Selectmen's meeting next week will also be here at the South School because of early voting. North School heating and cooling system is nearing completion, another week or so. Ed Buckley is on the agenda for next week. I have a home consortium meeting this Thursday, 8:30 a.m. in Taunton. And the continuation of the Ford River Estate meeting project is Wednesday, November 2nd, 7 p.m. at Town Hall.
Thank you. Any questions for Randy?
Nothing.
No.
Okay, Selectmen's report, Ms. Roberts.
I have nothing tonight.
Mrs. Smith.
I'm good.
Okay, correspondence is, we got it on that. So no other correspondence. We have no members of the press with us this evening, no emergency business. It doesn't look like any member of the community are staying with us this evening. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Adjourn, yes.